Joe Tyndall Thornton, and I grew up in Walhalla Community, Adair County, Oklahoma. My mother's name was Jency, and my father's name was William, and there were 8 of us children. We got our water from a spring, and we had to carry water, all the water we used, up a hill or haul it about 100 yards or so from the spring. It was quite a while before we ever got electricity. I think I was probably in high school or after I got out before we got electricity. The kids, they had their own parties, and they were swinging parties, and there's a little song they'd sing with them, like, happy was a miller boy lived by the mill turned around with a free goodwill. And they'd swing your partner, you know, and a little brass wagon, and those games, they're forgotten now. Nobody can tell you the words to those songs or can remember them. just like a square dance, only they just move the furniture back and have swinging games in the house. We swam in the creeks. That is in the summertime, of course. And those spring-fed creeks were really cold. I can remember that. But that is where I learned to swim, in one of those creeks. We fished in those creeks sometimes. The biggest fish in those creeks, though, was an eel, you know. And the guys would go out at night with a light and gig those big eels. That was a lot of the fishing that they did. I had an uncle that was quite a hunter and fisher, and I'd go gigging with him. We'd take a boat and light and gigs at night and up and down the river. When they hunted at night, they usually carried a kerosene lantern. And a lot of times they didn't have flashlights, so they'd carry a kerosene lantern. In the old days, everybody didn't have a cellar. Some of them did, but I can remember my dad digging a hole in the ground, throwing some hay in there, and he'd put potatoes, turnips, apples, maybe in that hole, and cover them up with hay, and then throw dirt on top of them, and they wouldn't freeze. It was sometimes when the snow was real deep, we didn't have rubber boots or protective shoes of any kind. We'd wrap toe sacks or gunny sacks around our feet and tie them and go out wading through the snow. My mother, she was more on the serious side, you know. She didn't care much about going to pie suppers and things, but Dad, he liked to have fun. So one night he said, son, would you like to go possum hunting tonight? I said, sure. So we got the dog and took off down the road, and I noticed we didn't get off the road. We just stayed on the road. In a little while, we came to the school. We went in there. They was having a pie supper. We went in, and he bought my girl's pie for me, and so I sure did enjoy that possum hunt. Eventually, we got to where we'd go to Stillwell to a movie once in a while. It was 12 miles to Stillwell, and before we got to Model A, if we went to Stillwell, it'd have to be in a wagon pulled by a team. We'd enjoy that quite a bit. We get to see a lot of people and maybe get some candy and such as that. Let's see, in 1928, my father bought a Model A Ford, one of the first Model A's that came out, and he taught me to drive, and I was 12 years old, and I drove around over the country in that Model A. Nowadays, they wouldn't let you do that. Occasionally, in the summertime, they'd have a ice cream supper. You know, they'd invite the neighbors in. They'd send a wagon to Stillwell, and they'd put some quilts or some wraps, blankets or something in there, and they'd get 100 pounds of ice, and they'd cover it up with those quilts and haul it home, and then they'd make ice cream, make it by a gallon freezer, you know. and they'd invite the neighbors in. We didn't have too many places to go, but if we went to the store, there were country stores all over the country, you know, in those days, and you could walk a mile maybe to a store. There used to be a grist mill, a water mill, about a mile or half a mile from our house, and a lot of the neighbors and us included, they'd put a sack of corn, shelled corn, on a horse and ride it down to the mill and have it ground into cornmeal. And that cornmeal made really good cornbread. Then I went to Cherokee for 3 years, and I enjoyed that. Had a lot of friends, you know, you make a lot of friends in those schools. They were a little more disciplined than colleges are nowadays. They marched you to meals and to church, you know, and all that sort of thing, but it wasn't bad. They had parties, dances and things. Of course, they looked to see that you didn't dance too close to each other. Things like that. When I was at Cherokee, I worked pretty hard. I had a dairy plot, but I made a little money out of it. I made my spending money that way. And I remember when I was a senior, I was going to buy me a suit to graduate in, and I had a little money, and I went to Arkansas City, and I had me a tailor-made suit made, and it was out of wool serge. It was good material, and they made it, you know, just to fit me. It was a real nice suit. It cost me $17.50. You couldn't buy the sleeve off one now for that.